Growing up as a black kid in Chicago, my idea of scary was a quiet street in suburbia. I felt this way because that is where the scariness usually begins in horror movies. Filmmakers often use a suburban landscape to exemplify normal American life, big houses, manicured lawns and seemingly calm streets, a milieu the audience is supposed to connect with before descending into the horror of the story. But these opening scenes are my earliest memories of feeling like an outsider, and they taught me to investigate what normal means in movies. As a child, watching Poltergeist, a 1982 film that follows a white middle-class family moving into their suburban house, I recognized that their normal was not my normal. I lived in an apartment in the city, and my child's mind thought, oh, so that's how they live in the suburbs. There was plenty in Poltergeist that did hit close to home for me. This story about a family trapped in their normal home awakened the possibility that even the ordinary objects of my everyday experience could become a source of evil and catastrophe. Nothing would ever feel truly safe again, not after seeing the static on a television screen become a channel for communicating with the dead. I made sure to close my bedroom closet door tightly for years after watching a similar closet door turn into a hell-raising portal to the underworld. And I would never, ever keep a clown in my room. These days, I cannot help but notice moments on the screen meant to signify normalcy. I rely on them to tease out information about the characters' worlds and the cultures they are based on. My early disconnection from the suburbs of Poltergeist led me to connect with the many different normals and many different evils of horror movies from around the world. Witnessing these different realities helps me see that my own everyday existence can yield stories worth telling. Nicole Feynman is a staff editor for video at The Times. For this week's edition of the race/related newsletter, we try to uncover what it is that horror movies teach us about ourselves and each other. We asked horror movie fans what they have learned about their identity or culture from a particular film or character, or how their identity relates to other cultures. When I was a kid, my family, like many black families, did not go camping or backpacking. We didn't have that luxury, nor did we find it fun. We were really in the woods during the day, and stayed far away from them overnight. That mystery of what might be out there in the wee hours fueled my imagination for years. It made me curious about the Friday the 13th movies growing up, though I was too afraid to watch them when I was young. And it may be why my favorite horror film is The Blair Witch Project. It's the ultimate woods freakout, where characters get lost among the leaves and end up hungry, cold and hunted, and yet the hunter remains unseen by audiences. I think the best horror is the kind that shows you less, leaving your own imagination to fill in the details, and mine has always run wild. My relationship with camping has gotten much better, but there's something still very creepy about the woods. Mekado Murphy is a senior movies editor at The Times. Lots of kids, Asian kids especially, grow up forced into piano lessons. There were lots of scales. Right hand first, then left hand, Beethoven for beginners and so forth. Really dry stuff. So I'll always remember being floored when I watched John Carpenter's Halloween for the first time, a poorly taped VHS copy of a copy, probably, which only made it scarier. I couldn't get over the soundtrack. It was simple but terrifying all by itself. When I later learned that it was in an odd time signature, featured lots of black keys, and was composed by Carpenter himself, I appreciated it even more. In those years, if you were ever at a family gathering in a house that had a piano, there'd be a show-off who was, like, a prodigy or a Juilliard student or whatever. Yet eventually they'd break out the Halloween theme song. Da 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 da. It was like Stairway. Everybody played it. John Woo is a senior editor for video at The Times and an occasional moonlighting musician. I love how often horror movie monsters can become allegorical stand-ins for what scares us. Back in high school, I came across the 1943 movie I Walked with a Zombie, and was floored by how this suspense movie dealt with repression, fear and racism. It caught my attention because my family is from a Caribbean island, and I grew up with stories about Santeria. Loosely based on Jane Eyre, The movie follows a nurse who is hired to care for the catatonic wife of a wealthy sugar plantation owner in the Caribbean. I walked with a zombies up front about the island's tragic history of slavery and the slave trade, even as some of its white characters would rather minimize their unsavory past to focus on the romantic melodrama. The white characters dismiss the blacks' voodoo practices, and their ignorance leads to fear of their non-white neighbors. I remember feeling relieved when it turned out that the movie's exoticized other wasn't the villain. As for people in power who don't know their history, now that's scary. Monica Castillo is a film writer for Watching at the Times. Even though interest in Asian horror movies skyrocketed in the early 2000s, with Japan's original Ring and Grudge franchises leading the pack, American remakes have tended to erase the original film's Eastern roots or tuck them into the background. While the Hollywood imperative, white stars mean more money, is often misguided, diversity actually means more money. Those Asian Americans who long to see Asian faces on the screen have had to turn to the countries of their ancestors' origins for satisfaction. Eggy, like me, who rode a bike to the local video store for VHS tapes when I was a kid, gives thanks every day for the advances in technology that have given us amazing access to the breadth and depth of world cinema. It's because of that accessibility that I stumbled across what has become one of my favorite horror films, Dorm Deck Hall, a 2006 ghost story from Thailand. In it, a young boy is sent to boarding school, and what's worse than being bullied by mean kids is being terrorized by ghosts who haunt the campus. What is striking about many of the Thai movies I've seen is that they are comfortable with diversifying their tone in wild ways that could bewilder some Western audiences. Amavi can veer from broad comedy to high melodrama in an instant. In Dorm, viewers are treated to creepy atmospherics, jump scares, coming-of-age drama, spiritual inquiry, and, ultimately, emotionally moving reveals. Life isn't one genre. Why should movies be? I am a mixed-race black woman, but I was raised in a white family and taught to identify as white. It took me years as an adult to develop my own sense of self as a person of color. Watching Jordan Peele's Get Out and seeing Georgina struggle with the white woman inside of her felt chillingly real to me. The horror of being internally suppressed by whiteness at the hands of people who are supposed to care about you, in a well-appointed suburban home where everything looks perfect from the outside, was something I had experienced growing up. Get Out made an impact on me because it was the first time I had seen the emotional trauma of my own experience dramatized and articulated on screen. Sure, there are plenty of movies scarier than Pan's Labyrinth, but the way the filmmaker Guillermo del Toro evokes myth and superstition is the stuff of nightmares. I'll never forget the first time I saw The Pale Man, a grotesque, gluttonous, child-eating monster with eyes in the palms of its hands. The Pale Man stuck with me. Growing up Latino, you hear stories about El Cuco, Louisiana La Llorona, and other sinister characters who punish perceived missteps. I not only believed in the supernatural, but actively feared it. I even used to refuse to look at scary movie covers, which adds a surprising amount of stress to one's life. Today, the movie terrifies me for slightly different reasons. Our hero's journey weaves between fantasy and reality, but it is during her time on plain Earth that we see the brutality and violence that the powerful inflict on the helpless. Pan's Labyrinth is a haunting reminder that evil exists among us, not just tucked away in the netherworld. For me, horror films like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Get Out work so well because they are less about the big scary supernatural monster and more about the seemingly well-meaning living and breathing menace among us. The Babadook, the Australian director Jennifer Kent's debut feature, goes further. It tells a downright cushion-gripping tale of how our personal demons, when left unattended, can turn into a sort of monster within. There's a picture book with a menacing shadowy figure in a black top hat and fringed clothing. Or are those his fingers? A widow who hasn't quite processed her husband's horrific death or her son's increasingly disturbing behavior, and a lot of ambiguities. Is this entity real or a psychological manifestation? The genius of the film is how it is meticulously constructed, and as each layer is peeled back, the true source of this evil comes into view. Ultimately, the film is a reminder of how powerless we can become when we neglect introspection and self-care. Nicole Harrington is an assistant editor in arts at the Times. As someone who falls asleep to horror movies, I know I don't get easily spooked. Whenever someone marvels at how I can stomach such regular intervals of gore, I always laugh it off with a firm, the real world is much scarier. But The Exorcist is the exception. Against my mother's stern warning, I watched it when I was 12. Despite my daytime viewing with a gaggle of girlfriends, I was terrified. I legitimately couldn't sleep for months. I was raised in a very religious household, and even though I'm not Catholic, I still firmly believed in God and the wrath of the devil. The idea of an otherwise well-behaved little girl, not that much younger than me, falling prey to that kind of pure, unrelenting evil tapped into my especially God-fearing childhood self. While I no longer identify as religious, when I re-watched The Exorcist in my freshman year of college, that familiar fear of the consequences of good and bad crept back in. 11 years later, I still have no interest in a repeat viewing. Fatima Haq is a social media editor at The Times. Tell or show us how you would flip the script. How would you recreate a scene from your favorite horror movie from your perspective? For example, what would Psycho look like if it took place in Detroit? Or if Train to Busan was filmed in New Orleans? What would those characters look like? How would we react differently to the story? Submit photos or video remaking a favorite moment or character from your cultural or racial perspective. If you submit video, here's how to do it. Hold your phone horizontally and film yourself answering the question. You can also have a loved one record you, if that's easier. Make sure you are in a quiet place so the audio is clear. Stand facing a light source so that you are well lit. If the light is behind you, you'll be silhouetted. Also, try not to have too much clutter around, it will distract viewers. Start recording a few seconds of silence before you speak and keep on recording for a few seconds after you're done. Watch the clip to make sure you are happy with the audio and light.
And now I know